Here we are, super excited to bring you Season 2, Weed for the People podcast, Episode 1. Of course, we had to come out of the box with a fire guest, Episode 1. We got Josh from Infinite here. Look, Season 1, it was really important to us to bring people forward in the industry that maybe not everybody knows, but are super critical. We brought 4 CEOs, people doing it right, that we're surviving. We're going to keep the same theme here. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on. Look, if there's anybody to discuss this topic, Josh is the expert. I'll just kind of give you a macro overview. As everybody knows, hopefully most people know by now, the LA Times did a story, on the issue in the legal market on some of the distillate vapes. From there, that's kind of blown up. I went down the rabbit hole the best I could, and we continue on the path of doing what's called Cat 4 oil. Without getting too deep into the 2023 fuckery, there appears to be some issues with the DCC test in 2023. I think largely those have been resolved. Every once in a while there might be one out there. They're still getting a few people for aspergillus. Hope I said that word right. Never get it right. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of gamesmanship still going on with the test. The big one that we're looking at is pymetrozine, which is Endeavor, illegal to put on crops in the state of California. People using it, it's going to be bad for your health. I'm not going to get too specific in the intro. I'll let Josh drop his knowledge on it. It's been a great resource for me personally, learned so much from him. And, anybody who read that LA Times story, anybody who's paying attention to, what's going on as far as trying to clean up the supply chain, Josh is at the forefront of that. Like I said in the post the other day, some say crusader, some say terrorist, some think he's a hero. At the end of the day, I lean more towards the hero side of it. We have a really good rapport. And I think when all the chips fall and the chapter is written on this part of cannabis history, I think he's a man that's going to have saved lives. And at the end of the day, people could debate the tactics, but if saving lives is the goal, there's no doubt in my mind as we continue to actually fix it. He's raised the awareness. He's been a good resource, part of the posse trying to clean it up, and lives have been saved. So want to welcome Josh to the podcast. Thanks for being our first guest. At this moment in time, couldn't think of anybody else I'd rather have.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Cool. Let me ask you a little bit about your background. Kind of first of all, I guess, maybe just go back a little bit, maybe to school all the way on up. And then I'd be curious, how you got into cannabis testing. I know you have some other, testing credentials, but maybe just run through your personal bio a little bit so people can know, how you got to here.
Yeah. Growing up, I was always in the cannabis industry, and then getting out of it, I did a few different things after high school. Ended up losing a bet to my oldest brother that I could get into college. And then I ended up going to Eastern Washington University, got a degree in chemistry, physics, and biology, and continued on to grad school. And that's how I ended up in California. A ways after, I ended up at UCSD and SDSU for a master's, and it was at UCSD for JDP, it's called, Joint Doctoral Program. And while I was in school, a lot of the cannabis was taken off in California. You were seeing a lot of...
What year?
This is 2014, 15.
Yeah,
starting to come in. You started to see there's a few labs out there. Some of them aren't around anymore. Some are. And you were hearing a lot of discussion in the industry like, oh, there's a lot of bad testing going on. I saw the importance of cannabis and just weed just being out there, and the importance of science to come to it or provide a quality testing to it. So I ended up starting the company, my company, Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, with one other grad student, or he was a grad student with me. He has a PhD in organic chemistry. So we kind of came in for the reason of public safety, and we started the lab out in 2015, 2016. So pre-regulation, kind of been it since then, helped write regulations, helped argue about the regulations. Cat 1, pesticides, I think I called 10 minutes after they dropped the first regulation and told them that was the worst idea ever, and we're going to end up where we are today because of it. So I've been kind of fighting for this industry, for the public safety aspect, and just to make sure we don't go backwards on this industry. So I think everyone starts to say we're in too big of an industry to go backwards, but I always say go back. A lot of people love to compare tobacco. I don't think tobacco would say the same thing, but you talk to them today, they're not doing too well either.
Right. So When we were testing stuff back in, I mean, not everybody was testing stuff, but like, what were the tests looking like in 14, 15, 16 as just, compared to today? One point I do want to make that, I'm constantly making is, and Josh could, maybe share some of his data. The black market is fucking dirty, right? Like 75-80% of what we tested was some of the worst shit, way higher than, like thousands of times higher than the limits. But like when you were doing, I mean, there wasn't that many people testing 14, 15. No. So like what were you seeing when you were doing
14, 15, that area, that time zone, I remember I was knocking on dispensaries' doors with the green crosses. Hey, you should test your pot, make sure it's safe. Get the fuck out. That was the kind of conversations I was having for a while. Started gaining traction, but we would end up seeing a lot of stuff just failing horribly. When I say failing, we look at the 66 pesticides in California. You would end up seeing like 20 at 200 times action levels, 500 times action levels. This is like action levels.
This is on flower.
This is on flower. This is on vapes. This is on everything. It was just, people were dunking back then. I mean, I knew people that grew and they told stories that, hey, you used to just have vats of myclobutanol and I would fucking dunk my plant upside down, dunk it and put it back in. And that's what they were doing. And then that's what you would see in the testing. So we would always see this and the kind of this industry's grown. I mean, from 2014, 2015, the industry has gotten cleaner. I will say that hands down, it has gotten cleaner in the state of California, but at the same time, it was not as quick as it should have been. And that's always been a driving passion to me. If we want to sell clean cannabis in the state that's protected by the state and has a set of regulations, at least we pass those regulations.
Let me ask you this. Why do you think you're doing I mean, we both are a little bit, but I'd say primarily you, like, where's the DCC on this? And again, like, I'm trying to avoid bashing the DCC too hard, but whatever, it is what it is. Like, why do you think they're getting 135 million a year? Why don't they have scientific people, lab people over there? I mean, they got all sorts of weird salaried people, like really important people to protect public safety. That's because that's one of their main mandates, I think. Why are they? I mean, how come they can't pick the ball up and run with it?
I mean, going back to the start of this industry too. I remember so many people were like, "Josh, you're throwing away your science degree. You're throwing away what you did, your career." And I'm like, "No, there's something fucking here. The public safety transcends, and safety testing for cannabis is where I want to be." So like, I kind of went into that. Why I'm saying that is, even the DCC or any of these regulatory bodies, they're doing the best they can. I'm like the people would never believe me saying this kind of stuff. But they had a bus driving down the road, and they're like, "Shit, we're supposed to do testing? Oh, we're way back there. Oh, we're supposed to now remember phase 1, phase 2. Oh, we're in phase 2. We haven't even talked about phase 1 yet, And then this keeps going down. Oh, we have 3 employees to regulate 12 labs, and then 50 employees to regulate 500 new licenses, and it just keeps going down the road. And I think they've been playing catch up. And why I say that too is like the industry, we all start to assume we've learned so much knowledge in it, and they're like, we all think, the regulators know that too. No, they don't.
Right. No,
you talk to them and you're like, there's a lot of things you assume, like, oh yeah, everyone knows this in the industry. No, they fucking don't.
No, they're like I say, we're in a little bit of an echo chamber. They're like outside the cave, like down by the river or something. It's and look, I think this issue is like on the forefront now. So, hopefully they do something to address it. But, my guess is that it's going to take, a group of passionate people in the industry to set the trend, and then everybody's, gonna follow along. As far as communications that you're comfortable with, I know a little bit about some emails and stuff. Got a few of my own in there. Yeah. So I know you were persistent. If that stuff you want to share about, kind of raising awareness and what they did, basically.
So I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, raising awareness. It's not to attack brands. It's not to attack people. My whole goal, you can call me a rat, you can call me a snitch, you can call me whatever.
Let me just interject there, though. If somebody is selling something dirty, like snitch need not apply, in my opinion, right? If you're poisoning people, and I've heard this argument a couple times, and this is just my opinion, and somebody catches you poisoning people, like you're not a fucking snitch. That's just my 2 cents on it. You're helping out the entire public safety. So, that's my opinion, but it's been thrown around. Yeah.
I hear everything. I mean, I have heard it all. So, I mean, that's my perspective too. If people want to say I'm a bad person because I'm protecting the public, fuck, that's what I signed up for. Call me a bad person. I don't really care. That's not why I'm here, to be a good person or a bad person in someone's opinion. So we go down this road, and in like 2016, 2018, my estimates for failures on the shelf, if you just solely look at pesticides, was 80%.
And
that's from data, not from like.
Does that include the
66 pesticides?
Just the 66.
Just the 66 in 2018. 2018 was one of the heights of the bad because like you think this is all coming out of when we phase 1, 2, 3, you know what I mean? And as the phases came through, that product, you know, you grow trim, it takes a year. We talked about it takes a while to make it onto the shelf. The same thing. The pesticides were flowing through the system. It takes a while. It goes in the pens, everything else.
Well, until July, I think, of 18, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. We could just buy turkey bags coming through the door. And then again, my ignorance was, you know, you just think cannabis, natural, safe, right?
Yeah.
And I had been around some grows, and you know they've been blasted with a little bit of stuff. In hindsight, like, oh, you know, we probably shouldn't have done that, but you know what you know when you know it. Not something that I'm proud of. But at the end of the day, like up until then, think about it: a turkey bag walks through the front door, and never even saw a lab.
So back then too, it was all R&D testing and trusting. So I remember people would get a clean COA for a liter. And that represented 20,000 liters in the next fucking 6 months because they just gave the same liter. And then that's when the whole thing started with bag and tagging and like that. We've been seeing this through the whole industry. But at the same time, this industry, I've been around, hey, pass my fucking samples or I'm leaving. This guy passes them. So like that's what in 2018, we used to find a lot of samples. I mean, I used to send out the samples to the labs. But I know the producers straight had a list like, hey, you fail for chlorphenapir, these are the 4 labs to go to. You want it to pass, this is what you get. I mean, there's lists that go around, and they actually were correct. And I've always thought, like, a regulatory body, you work with them, you know, you don't get treated poorly if you're on the side of public safety. I'm not saying everyone treated me poorly. I feel like a lot of the people, they don't have the power to do anything.
Yeah, I think they're somewhat a subject of the legislature and the legislature and you know, basically with the executive, you know, kind of based on the framework, but still. Right? Like if they're not taking care of that, and then the part I found super ironic is they had just put out an ad before the LA Times story broke about how safe the product was. They spent $5 million of our money. This is licensing fees that we pay, right? I just got to pay another one this week, 96 grand every time. And we got, you know, they're not all 96, but the bigger stores got to pay 96. And on top of that, they still don't have their lab open, right? They're 15 million into that fucking thing.
I think it's 13.8. They're into it or something like that.
And they don't have it open?
It's open. It's just not running all the analysis from what I can tell. There's 2 labs. There's one in Richmond. There's one at UCSD. UCSD was sanctioned with that big funding to do a lab back.
But if you don't mind me asking, how much in your labs is state of the art? How much does that cost to build?
All in, probably 4 or 5 million over the years.
And this is the problem with the government, just in general, but especially in cannabis, right? So you got somebody who could build a lab for 4 or 5 million. And instead, the DCC spent 13.8 million in counting with a lab that still really doesn't work that well, and 5 million on a commercial. And they're not. A commercial doesn't help public safety, right? Like, is the legal market safer than the black market? Of course. But at the end of the day, our job is to make it, you know, perfect, right? So, you know, you're trying to get the DCC to do something because you're finding different samples that you know are popping dirty. And, you know, you're hitting them up and their response is,
thanks, nothing. I mean, so it's like going into a black hole. You're yelling at a wall for years. I mean, over the years, you keep yelling at the wall and you hope something's going to change. You keep getting glimpses of hope that something's going to change or they're going to fix something. And I think it's understaffed. And, I mean, you read the complaints that came out and stuff. They're tracing stuff back 2 years and complaints that are coming out today. I mean, it's just, I think it's the workflow of the government, and I'm not blaming the DCC or anyone else. Sometimes it's just the government cogs spins a lot slower than any of us want it to. You kind of wish it would happen for public safety a lot faster. But you going through the years, I mean, it kind of just picks up. It's not like a lot of people are like, oh, this is all business motivated, money motivated. This isn't why. I mean, I work with a lot of great producers that are doing it right, and people that spend the extra money for years doing it that way and are at a financial disadvantage because they'll, oh, I have dirty product, I throw that away. Not I have dirty product, I go to another lab to shop it. I mean, this is a widely known thing in the industry. I don't think anyone's going to deny that.
We just did a run and threw away the, you know, once there's anything in there that's not non-detect on the biomass, you know, you throw it out. So it is a true thing that the black market is a dumping ground. You know, we've personally done enough testing. I think, Josh, how many tests have you total, if you don't mind sharing, like you have some serious fucking data, right?
So like people always think I'm making assumptions or something. I'm making conclusion based upon data, and I don't use small data sets. Like last data set I think I did was 300 SKUs. So that's not a small data set. I mean, these are telling stories of data sets. I mean, if you want to talk about the hemp industry, I mean, I did a data set of 500 SKUs or something looking at it and saw insane fail rates.
And you're talking pesticide fail rates.
Pesticide,
It's
metals.
all, and then
So like it normally, sorry,
go ahead.
I
No.
normally look at it and I take it and say, whatever state the hemp, is coming from, and that's how you decide it. So I use California pesticide regulations or something like that. But I can do Colorado regulations. You can start doing extended. You can do a lot of things. And that's what we always try to look at is it actually safe? I mean, so hemp is a broad term. Hemp 3 years ago was a different thing. It was actually hemp or, a type 3 plant that doesn't have THC synthase, where now it's whatever we call it, So
so what do you say to the
changed.
people, these big hemp advocates? And look, I think if it was safe and it's a path into the red states, I would say, it's a states' rights issue, and just personally I advocate. But all these big hemp guys that aren't really doing the testing, that are doing fake COAs, that are now in, a lot of these states. I mean, do you foresee? I mean, you're fucking buy some of this shit in gas stations.
Yeah.
I mean, those are going to be, unless they put a regulation in place and or ban hemp, which to me is a step backwards. So they need some regulation. Not that I'm a big fan of huge government regulation, but I mean, what do you think?
Well,
How do you think that ends? Right.
They have regulation.
Right.
It's just no enforcement. So like hemp needs to be grown on a USDA approved farm. So anything stamped with Farm Bill compliant would have to trace back to a USDA farm. This is coming from the USDA and the FDA. I was sitting at a table talking with both of them, and that's their determination. If the hemp plant does not trace back to a USDA farm done by a USDA approved lab to test the product, that is total THC in their opinion, or not their opinion, what they told me the regulation says, then it's not actually hemp.
And then,
So
not to go too deep down the hemp rabbit hole, but I'm super interested in it. So we've talked about this a little bit, just because we're flirting with the idea. We would sell clean hemp if we did it, and we would want to be sure on the loophole. But what do you think about guys? And we've talked about this. Your reading of the law. So guys are basically testing real early, and then what's happening is. And I know, without saying names, the really careful ones that are the bigger brands are keeping the plants just in case there is a legal issue. What do you think about guys that are testing when it's really, really young? And just in case the viewers don't understand, if it's Delta 9 under 0.3, it could be legally hemp, and then THCA accidentally got carved out. I know some people think it's all THC and it's bullshit. But the hemp lawyers and what's holding up the entire hemp industry is this little THCA thing. And without getting too deep down the rabbit hole, you light it on fire, then it becomes regular Delta 9 THC. So it's a fascinating loophole. But what do you think about these guys harvesting really early or testing the whole plant to get the THC down? Is a legal matter, right, and get it out of the state? I mean, we've had a few conversations, but I think it's an interesting topic to throw Josh's 3 cents on it. We'll call it. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, my perspective is it's the product you have the day you have it. So if I showed up and the THC, I went to a store and bought it, and they arrested me for buying that plant, are they going to be like, what was that when it was grown? No, they're not going to talk about that. Then why don't you just test the seed? And be like, oh, it once was below anything. It had no CBD in it, no THC detectable. Okay, perfect. The thought process of this makes no sense. It's the product as it's sold. So you're selling it to a customer at some point in time, and if the legal threshold is 0.3%, then how is it only the legal threshold when it was grown? Why not keep going backwards? Why not just pick little budlings? I mean, where do we stop?
That's essentially what's going on, right?
I get what you're saying, but it doesn't make it legal.
Yeah, and well, then you got and then so then once they test it and it hits the shelf, very little flour is under 0.3. So they could say what they want. It's just very, very little is going to be under 0.3. Once you cure it, 0.6, you cure it long, you're up at about 1%. So let's say you have, a real 22%, which is where 25, 27 is. Spoiler alert, not much tests in the 30s. But so like if you transport it, you test it at this part, oh, I got it fresh. I got a 0.25, and you transport it. And then by the time you sell it, I don't care who you are, you're selling it probably at, 0.6, 0.8, 1%. And then the legal argument is it decarboxylated. Did I say that fucking right?
Decarboxylated, yeah.
Yeah, I think I got it right. So just decarb is the easy way to say it. And therefore, that's giving them a legal defense. But your opinion is that that's not what the...
I mean, so if I was producing, meth, and I started with my precursor, I'm like, I tested the precursor and it's not meth, and I did a synthetic process, now it is meth. Oh, it's legal because I tested it pre-making the meth. that's exactly what's happening in decarboxylation. It's just a natural process, and okay, it's the precursor of your delta 9. So why does it make it legal at the end?
It was a little bit like, say 215, used to have those big notebooks. We didn't sell any weed to those, right?
Yeah.
We sold it all in packs to a few people, right? So, it's a little bit of a legal defense, but I do want to see the hemp market. You could debate the legality of it and all that, but at a minimum, it should be clean, and it's not today. And I do think if you're smoking hemp in other states, just be aware, maybe you're fine with the risk and you can't get weed any other way, and you're fine smoking cigarettes too or whatever else, or vaping, but just be aware that it's not not safe. I want to ask you the lead up to the LA Times story, and how all that went down. I was hearing for months that it was going to break. Any role that you played in it, if you want to talk about it, or because that I think that story is a new paradigm in cannabis. And, again, there's posses forming up that are working on resolving this. I think most of the DCC issues have been resolved, but, what was the lead up to that? How did that shit go down? Et cetera, et cetera.
So, I mean, it was nothing new to me, the fail rates and things like that. And the lead up on that was, I've talked to a lot of people in the industry for years. I mean, I wasn't as loud. About 2 years ago, I just said, fuck it. I'm done just being quiet, because being quiet and saying things to regulators on back end and emails or anyone else and talking quietly doesn't protect the public. I've tried that route, and that's leads up to this, is I've tried that route of being quiet and, being a lab person and just reporting things and to the clients, and then report anything I need to, and it didn't seem to be doing anything. And so what I did is I started making public comments. I started being in podcasts, videos. So I ended up hooking up with LA Times probably a year before that article came out.
I was hearing rumors, it's coming, and then
that's
of course I was hearing
part,
I wasn't hearing it like what it was. I was hearing certain versions of it, but it took them a while to break it. But were you on the ground? Would you say you're on the ground floor of that?
I was on the basement. I wasn't even a part of the LA Times. None of the samples tested in the LA Times article was tested by me.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot of back end things I did test might just have gave them clues on what to look for,
right,
or what they're looking at. So I mean, over the years, I've worked with organizations, individuals, dispensaries, all sorts of people that have asked me to test product off shelf, and so my knowledge of what brands are failing and not failing, and I know maybe we're not going to agree on it, but in the past, you can trace things that brands fail 75% of the time.
Yeah,
I have data. I have data to
throw
provide
anybody
that.
under the bus you want, man. I'm not
here to throw the people under the bus. They know who they are.
Right.
They said things against me. They said violent things. They threatened my family. Fuck you. Don't threaten people's children. Threaten me all you want. Fuck you. That's what I would say on that one. But the whole thing leads up, and my role in the LA Times article was kind of just talking to people and sharing data that I had. And then during that time, a lot of that data that's public, is at the DCC's office. There's paper trails that say how many days things sat being reported failing for 13 pesticides at 2,000 the limit. There's pictures of everything. Nothing's ever tampered with. There's a lot of accusations. Josh took the samples and spiked them. Why the fuck would I do that? You know how many samples passed testing? And I don't mess with anyone. I don't have any vindictives against any one person or anything. The whole thing's clean up the shelves. Have safe product for the consumers. So overall, not talking too much into it, but I guess I played some kind of role in it in helping out steer the boat or direct the ship on where it went to. But I saw a lot of the testing. I did a lot of testing in the background on that thing that don't show up in that article.
Let me ask you more of a personal one, because I've been through this a little bit myself, and I'm not going to say too much about it just because why do it? But whatever, I guess I'll say it. But the personal threats, just dealing with all that, right? Just how is that? Just on you personally, and then your family, and just getting up knowing hey man, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I have staked out this position, right? And again, people could debate tactics all they want, but I think it's very hard for any reasonable mind to debate that you haven't been a big part of pushing the envelope on the safety, and then to basically have people threaten you I'll just say it, for telling the truth. Like, how is that, I guess to deal with it just on a personal level?
Overall, I mean, this happened. It's not just a one-time incident either. This happened. It's just shocking. Like, I mean, I'm an analytical chemist that runs a safety testing lab, and I'm getting death threats. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, those things normally don't go together. We're like the nerds. I don't look like a nerd. I grew up differently. But at the same time, it's not the segment that you expect that to be coming in. Sure, the cannabis industry might, people say it doesn't have the people who maybe grew up in the other industries. So it was shocking, to say the least. The toll on it, it's again, what I said before is, threaten me, don't threaten my fucking family. That's a different thing to do, especially for safety testing and protecting people. The big driver on a lot of this stuff too is like, I have kids, and the biggest thing is like, I don't want people consuming cannabis and one day their kids, they're 15 years old, they lose their parents because they smoke cannabis. And it's not because they smoke THC or cannabis, it's because they smoke the contaminants, because we had to lie and cheat a system to save a fucking $1.
It's not even a full dollar on a vape, by the way. It's like 20 cents. And we'll get into the math and all that later. But it's like, the amazing part about this, once I kind of like solved back for the problem to the root cause, you're talking 20, 25 cents. Now, there's a lot of, places in the chain, and you gave me a little bit of chills when you talked about your family. But, funny enough, the motivation, like for that post, I was in Grover Beach, and I wasn't planning. I was kind of watching it play out and just watching everybody's response. And we were opening our grand opening there in Grover Beach. So I was with my whole family. I was kind of doing the day with them, and we were rolling down the sand dunes and shit, having a good time. And then for whatever reason, I'm kind of tired. I'm all sandy and shit. I'm old. I roll really fast. I'm getting a little dizzy and shit. And I start watching my kids, and I'm thinking about it like, man, I don't want to be a part of this, right? So that kind of thought gets plugged in my head, but I'm fucking around on the hills. And, I drive home, whatever. Everybody's been in the sun all day. So it's not that late. It's maybe 9:30. And I'm just kind of rolling in bed. My wife's fucking just asleep. I'm, in a hotel room. And I'm like, you know what? I'm fucking not going to be part of selling dirty product. I'm fucking not. So I get all fired up, like I like to do. And then I fucking just dropped this post. And it was the same thought, which is, hey, my kids are almost going to be, I was just having a talk with my son yesterday. He's a funny guy. He's like, what? You're wearing a vape pad? What the fuck does that mean? I'm like, I'm trying to make them safe, dog. And look, I'm not ragging on any brands. We're super friendly with a lot of the distillate brands. But, that's the only thing I taught him. Don't smoke distillate. And that was before when you're of age, do what you want. Don't smoke distillate. That was before the whole story broke, just because, it's a different part of the plant and whatever, who knows what's in the flavors and all that. But that's really what kind of like hit me. Then of course I woke up the next day and then started thinking about, oh shit, hopefully none of these guys are dirty. I had like a fucking freak out moment, like the Jerry Maguire when he released, it's kind of like that scene. He releases the fucking thing, and then like he's like on a roll that night, and then he wakes up in the morning and the thing's already out, and he's like, oh shit, I got to fucking deal with this, right? So it's been actually like really cool journey. But like, I'm driving in on Monday and I'm hitting, you're going to be good, right? You're fucking good. I was going to test all the big brands and everybody in the story, no matter what they said, but I'm just trying to, calm myself. So I do think that, future generations, and not just that, you got, people that are 20 something, or 30 or 40, doesn't matter. But if they put 20, 25 years on it, I really think if this doesn't get cleaned up, this is going to be like tobacco was in the 20s and 30s, as ridiculous as we think it is. Look, you're always living in an old time. You just aren't living in an old time now because you're living in present time, right? Like we're somebody else's medieval times. We're somebody else's 20s, 50s. Like, what? Doctors prescribe cigarettes? What? They used to say it was safe. And I think
marijuana.
Yeah. People are going to say, oh, cannabis was natural. It was whatever, right? So, I think it's, I think when you have children too, and hey, look, you don't need to have children, but seeing the world through their eyes and knowing they're going to be of age, I think brings it to that, that point. So, you're on this journey of, testing and stuff. And I want to touch on this because this is a super important part of it. The brands get to pick the labs.
Yes.
I think that's a fucking problem.
Yes.
And, the analogy I've used, I was in real estate, up until like 2013. And when everybody busted out in '08, we used to be able to pick the appraiser as the buyer's agent. And my motherfucking appraiser was bringing it in, right? Like, that's it. Like, or you're not going to get, I'm not, whatever. You're not going to get brought back. Just a bank, whatever, no big deal. But at the end of the day, this is people's health. And by letting the brands choose the labs, and look, there's a customer service element and who you want to work with, whatever. But at the end of the day, you're losing a lot of business, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a lot easier to tell people what they want to hear. So even if someone's not asking for it, and so, okay, take the step back in this whole process. I'm almost a decade into this in the testing industry. That's like dinosaur.
Like 100 years.
Just like 100 years. Like we've seen it change and transform. And like the knowledge I have in this industry is far past a lot of people's others. And it changes over time. I mean, I remember years ago it was being told what to do. You pass these samples. Hey, I'll bring 100K to your house and drop it on your porch once a month if every one of my samples come clean. Fuck off. And then guess what? You see them leave and you see where they end up. What the fuck do I think happened at that next lab? I don't think. I know exactly what happened at the lab. I'm not going to name the lab. I'm not going to name the brand. These aren't small players. And this has happened over the years. So like the amount of like conversations I've had or my employees have had on my behalf, or I've had emails or texts or whatever it is that said, hey, guess what? You're failing me. This person passes me. I know it's in there. I don't give a shit. Pass it. I mean, this is what's happened over the years.
Have you had direct solicitations? I mean, now that
a million percent.
Yeah, now that people know who you are. Right?
Oh no.
But in the early days, right? Like I'll give you a duffel bag kind of thing.
Oh, $100,000 was the best offer I ever had a month for cash. I turned it down. That was when we weren't even running $100,000 a month, probably.
Right. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah.
So just to get the motivation there, right? $100,000 duffel bag, right? So if it's happened, again, like they say, you've seen it once, you've seen it, 100 times, and I've heard all the same rumors and sample switching, bribery, lab shopping, et cetera, right? So you've been offered $100,000 to pass a batch.
Pass batches going forward. So
going
brand
forward.
pass, just pass.
Just pass.
And these are big brands. I mean, I'm not going to name any names or anything. I'm not out here to do that. They know who they are. I know who they are. So, I mean, this over the years, this has happened. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like if you're as a lab, the hardest thing to do is like, oh, this is my best client. I'm working with him for 2 years. Oh, he just failed 5 samples in a row. He's like, I'm fucking hard up for money. I can't fail these samples. Well, they fail. You know what I mean? And so that's what happens. You have the clients that stick with you like, nope, I'm here to make clean product. And you have the clients, fuck you, I can go get the passing results.
Right.
I mean, let alone this be passing contaminant failing, let alone this be potency inflation, let it be whatever have you. This has changed over the years. Well, we've had a lot of different rides on this.
I was going to get the potency one. We've done a couple just because I had a few samples that were lying around. So I got a few places to go on this potency thing. But what would you say, based on your data, the average potency dick inflation, more or less, is in the cannabis industry right now?
So from my personal data on flower, I would say the average potency flower for total THC is between 22 and 24%.
And so we're seeing
average. We're seeing top and bottom.
So we're seeing 36, 38s, 35s, and then there's stuff in the teens, right?
So there's stuff in the teens.
You'll never see anything in the teens on our shelf anymore, right?
There's stuff in the teens on your shelf all over your shelf.
No, I mean marked. No, I know that. Yeah. And because what used to happen, and people figured it out, we used to see a few things in the teens, right? And then it just became a thing, and it's unfortunate the consumer is stuck on this a little bit. This one, I still think is a sin, but as far as Dante's 9 levels of Inferno, you're probably around level 3 here, but still needs to be cleaned up. And then we shouldn't punish labs that are actually giving accurate results. Personally, I'd like to see the DCC just get rid of THC on flower 100%. Because all it's done is create an arms race for inbreeding, which is bad. And it doesn't matter anyway. There's all this data on the Emerald Cup. Everybody, THC doesn't matter. It's one element. It might show you within a strain how well that strain was growing. But it's not a factor. But, again, back to the teens thing, if you were at 17, 18, I couldn't sell you, right? And so, and look, we just tested some bulk.
This is over years, though. Yeah. I mean, over the years, you've owned dispensaries a long time. I mean, back in like 2020, the number was 20%. Fucking if you have under, I think 2021 probably, it hit this 20% number. If it said less than 20%, you're not getting on a shelf. And then 22 area, you got up to 25. 23, you were fucking 30 almost. 28, I think the number was. And that was to get on the shelf. I mean, I've known people growing cannabis like I grew up with out of the state, and they ended up in California. I would test their product. I would fail their product. I'd fail my mom's product if it failed. I don't really care. And then over the years, like they would be like, Josh, I'm dying. I grow 22% flower. It's 25 is the number. I'm going to the dispensaries, and the buyers are saying, get out of here. It doesn't say 25. And then they would call me, hey, can it just say 25? Grow 25 weed is what I would tell them. And I mean, I had the conversation with people I've known for a very long time. You know what? Don't take the food off your kid's table. Lee, I'm not going to produce the results because I'll live and die on that sword, but you don't have to.
Right.
Go to the other labs.
Right.
I've told people that over the years. I mean, I went down to one flower client in 2023. I had one person that tested with me still over the years that tested flower with me.
One. Imagine that. Out of
60% of the industry, I think, is flower, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty deep. And then, we've run one just for fun because I was sitting on some bulk flower, and it was, and your result was 0.1 difference from the other blind result on the THC. And I actually didn't put it out for THC testing, but interestingly enough, I think it just was part of the test. And I just chuckled because I think it was like 17, and that's listed, up in the high 20s or low 30s, right? And then it's pretty strain specific. Is minor, like GMO tests high, but nothing else is really getting into. In other words, like take a strain, and then I'll let you kind of elaborate on this. This strain could be grown between 22 and 26, depending on how well you grow it, basically, right? And you're not breaking above 26 no matter what, unless you're cheating, right?
Yep.
So, how do you explain, like, with all these strains? I mean, you could probably walk into the store next door and just be like, nope, that strain is 22 to 25. This strain. So, how is this continuing to go on? Do you think just no will to enforce, or I'm a little sympathetic to the brands because it's kind of like everybody else is doing it. So if I don't do it, I'm going to be fucked. I'm not going to be able to sell anything. But if they just clamped on it, right, we could resolve.
That's what they're doing now, is clamping on it. And I can go into that. So you asked a question like my data. So I've actually looked at a lot of data. I think we're up to like about 2 million points around the country. And you start looking at it, and one thing about the cannabis plant is you can think about the THC concentration or total THC. It's like a bell-shaped curve. So when we talked about that average is 22, 24, it sits right in the middle, but you have a bell-shaped curve with some of them producing a lot more, up to you see 32, 34. You can. It's just sub 1% of the population of the cannabis plant is going to grow that. And then you're going to go the other way. So you have 22, 24, you're getting down to 14. I'll tell you, there's stuff on the shelf labeled at 28 that's 14.
Oh, for sure.
So it's just as egregious as someone labeling
by the way,
20.
I personally know a guy, and he wasn't deep on the testing part, more on the branding part, and we had his flower, and then it got released in another state where, for whatever reason, THCA inflation isn't all the rage, and it went from like a 30 to a 14.
Yep.
Like it's that big of a difference, right? And
over the years, this has changed. Like I feel like there was pressures originally from growers, and then the labs started putting the pressure on the growers. Like, hey, you're not selling your product at 20. Why don't you test with me and try this out? Here's some free tests. Oh, you got 25. And the next lab comes in. Oh, you got 30. And it's like this progressive thing.
How do you think the labs are gaming that? Are they just totally lying, or do they have a process that gives them plausible deniability?
In my personal opinion, no.
They're just making it up.
So the thing is, if you're making an effort to do this, I could produce any data and produce a data pack. And I've challenged regulators in the past, like, hey, you want to stop the cheating, you need to do something like shelf testing. You need to look at things. Because if you want me to make the pretty packages in the background, like for lab packages, I can make any number. You tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you, and you'll never catch me. Why? Because I can tell you people doing it aren't that smart. If you get someone actually knows what they're doing to do it, then it's very easy to hide things. But that's not the purpose of it. I mean, so how do they do it? It's knowingly and willingly. I mean, honestly, you can look at your data, and a grower can do it, or anyone can do it. Go look at the same strain that grown by the same grower for the last 5 years, and go look at the roller coaster of the ride it's been on. So it starts at 18, goes up to 38, drops down when the DCC did a new regulation, then pop back up.
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody on blast, but Glass House did this. But there's did I say Glass House? Did I say that out loud? No, no specific brand. It could be them, who knows? But if you went to their website and now they had taken it down, the same strain was 18, is now 32. Is that possible?
No. The same strain will not transcend that much.
Right. To be fair, even though I like the rag Glass House a little bit, it's not just them. It's everybody.
No,
so I don't want to pick them out of a lineup other than it's fun. But they were so arrogant about it, or lacked the understanding. They were posting on their website that hey, this strain started at 18. And then they put all their COAs on their website. And by the end, it's up to 32, 33, 34. That's not possible.
It's not possible. I mean, the same strain. But the thing is, the crazy part is about the strains. it's really the decision of the grower too. At the last minute, they can go on Metric and change the strain name.
Well, yeah.
So to 30 seconds. I mean, so like strains aren't really strains anymore. It's like, oh, you said GMO is a new hot topic. I think it's 35. Oh, now GMO is my strain. It was this when I grew it.
Well, the other thing they could do that's hard to like is the old switcheroo. So like even with a clean lab, and this is kind of through the process was I learned that also happened. They could give you, let's say, a high THC GMO, and then something that tests a lot lower. You would give them a test. You would do nothing wrong. You would test it at whatever 30%, 31%, and then they just switch batches, right?
So that could happen, and like let's say that's happening rampantly, and let's say 10% of the time is rampant. That would be pretty high, right? Why is it 95% of the time? It's not. That's not what's happening. You understand what I'm saying?
No, yeah. No, it's the labs. I agree, but I'm just.
I mean, I didn't say that about the labs. That's what he said. I don't know who it is. It's going to be. It's changed over the years, and it's going to.
And you think coming down the pipe, a little bit of breaking news maybe, is THC inflation. So we've seen recalls for Aspergillus. We've seen old recalls from in September, October of 2023. One of the Aspergilluses we carried. One of the recalls we carried substantially at like 20 fucking however many stores we had at the time, and it was a 2023, pretty lame recall that's whatever 2 months old maybe now at most, 6 weeks, whatever it's been. You think there's going to be THC inflation recalls?
There have been. Right. So if you look at the recalls, they list it as one of the reasons. It's not a primary reason yet, but lots of the recalls this year have had THC content. Or THC inflation. Then if you look at the citations issued to the labs, there's peppered in there all over the place. So the DCC made it a new method, standardized starting at the beginning of the year, and everyone has to run that. And now they went through their checks, and now everyone has kind of had their warning because they audited everyone's method. And so I think it's time that you might see a change on that.
But the numbers seem to be going back up again, no?
So yes. So it originally when it first started, it dropped off, and then people, again, this is my assumption, I don't have any evidence of it. They started losing clients. People try, someone wants the business, they say they'll do it, and then they move labs. Labs said, hey, money's more important than honesty and integrity, so I go ahead and I start doing it again. So you saw a roller coaster. I mean, you saw it. It dropped off right in the beginning when the DC reg happened. Then it started going back up, and then it went back up, and that stabilized. And it's, in my opinion now, before this regulation, it was about 33% average. Now I think you're at 29 or 30. Like I said, the real average is 24 to 30. So you're still well off that number, right?
So you'd say about 8 to 10 is the mean cheating is 8 to 10%.
Well, you say 8 to 10%, but realistically, when you do that, it's a relative percentage. So 20%.
Yeah, I get it.
30.
Right,
yeah, you're going up 50%.
Yeah, if you go from 20 to 30, it's 33%.
And that's
like 10% THC inflation, 30 to 40% miss.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where your question before is it analytical error almost.
Right.
That's really hard to stack your analytical error unless you're intentionally doing it.
Right.
So there's ways to do it. So that brings up a point. Like I wrote a 3-part series with one of my cohorts, Eric Paulson. We wrote with Beard Bros. We authored a 3-part series where we took flower. We didn't put brands on blast or anything else. There was, I think, 28 samples or 30 samples of flower. And we took it, and we didn't just theoretically do anything. We took the samples, and we did systematic error. So I tested it, and you labeled at 28, tested at 14. How do I get it to fucking 28? Oh, I do this lab error, I do this lab error. And we did this in the laboratory, and then we would hit the number. And so, oh, look, this sample won. They must have systematically done this, and that to get that 28. And we kind of showed what everyone's doing to get there.
So you think the labs basically have some program, some, we don't know which labs, but you believe that there's a program out there that within, like they have a system such that it kind of gives them a little bit of a fallback if they get audited.
But so this is the thing I don't think it is, because it doesn't matter if you. So ignorance is not an excuse for fraud.
Right.
So just because, I didn't know how to do that. Well, you're running a lab, sir. That's actually exactly what you're supposed to know how to do. And if you don't know how to do it, you shouldn't be in the industry doing it. So you can't be a doctor just because you watch a doctor on TV. I've said that to you before. It doesn't work like that. So you're going to see this kind of stuff kind of go down the line. I think we might see changes. I've been saying that for years. I hope there is. And it's not the one reason is this, is I feel like THC inflation is like the gateway drug of lab fraud. Oh, you do that, and then they also need passing pesticides. Oh shit, if I fail it, they know something about me. I'm doing this for them. You know what I mean? And it's just a systematic thing where you get a landslide, and that was like the gateway way of this big movement, right. Or one of them. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Cat 4. Yeah. I think that's a fucking interesting topic. There would be no Cat 4, I don't think, if Infinite and Resco. I mean, there wouldn't. Nobody was tested for it. If Infinite and Resco didn't exist, and I want to lay it out a little bit. Some folks are trying to define exactly what Cat 4 is. For now, the de facto definition for me is get through an Resco or Infinite test, or until some of the other guys get caught up. It appears there's about 15 that are mostly being used. So there's 66 chemicals that are banned by the DCC. There's these other chemicals, to be clear, are illegal to apply in California, right? So
are the 66.
So the 66, right? So I've heard a lot of arguments that, people saying different things like, oh, well, when DCC says, we can't use it, whatever, then we'll stop using it. But it's already illegal in California, right? So people need to understand this is already illegal, but the DCC is just not testing it. And the one that I've seen enough tests, have some other, kind of hearsay data. People have tested this shit out of my shelf, which is good, because then we could kind of roll back on the supply chain. So, Josh has developed a test. How many are on there?
Over 350, about 380, somewhere in there.
380 different chemicals that he tests for. And Resco, very similar. The main one that's being abused this year is, pymetrozine. The common name is Endeavor. Go look it up. It's bad for you. It will fucking kill you. So what we're striving out to do, I had a really good meeting yesterday with a posse of guys. We're also going to start marketing it on our shelf. We're also trying to help brands source and get on the Cat 4 program. But, just the pymetrozine, and health effects. And then, I know we've talked about it, but I'll let you share your own data. What percent of vapes do you think it's in that you've tested? And, what are the long-term health effects? And, I think especially the people that are, smoking a vape a day, which God loves you, or 2 or 3 a week, heavy smokers, I think the Cat 4, again, we're bringing it, and, not to overmarket it, but at the end of the day, like, yo, dude, you're smoking a lot of vapes. You need to move to the Cat 4, or I really believe there's going to be a tobacco moment in this industry. So we're pretty close to launching that. As soon as I got gamed up on it, frankly, you're going all the way back to what I said in Grover Beach. I didn't know where it was going to lead me. Then I went to test. Then I tested. Then guys were chiming in like, that's a bullshit fucking test. It doesn't test for all these other chemicals. And I was like, what? There's another test out there? I thought like DCC, took it on. So then as I talked to all these different labs, I realized like, whoa, I'm way deep into the rabbit hole. So I've learned probably more about, definitely more about testing than I ever thought I would in the last 6 months. But I want to get your opinion on Endeavor, how dangerous it is, and, what percent of samples are you seeing it in?
So I'll back up a little bit. Like the pesticide list, we proposed this kind of stuff for years to growers, and no one wants it, or not growers, everyone in the industry. People didn't want to do it because it could show a fault. So we kind of took it on. This is like a regulatory body's onus, I would say, is to make sure no one's using something they're not supposed to be. And that's what we kind of did, is we looked at samples and said, what's kind of being tracked down? So like we're talking about pymetrozine as a primary big component, what we're seeing heavily used in cultivation in California. And why I'm saying these things like applied and used is because you can look at it. So what we did is we've done studies on large amounts, very large amounts of different SKUs.
How many total samples in your life? Just for, and look, I always say if you don't test the shelf, you don't really know.
Yeah.
The shelf is the truth, right?
Yeah.
Because it's there.
It's there.
It's there. Like, there's all sorts of shit that can happen on its way there, but it's there. So that's the truth. How many total do you think you've done?
Total tests?
Yeah, like let's just say over the last 3 years.
I don't know. Thousands, tens of thousands. I don't even know. That, like,
imagine
for
that
shelf
much
testing.
Data. I'm not talking about tests you got paid for. I'm talking about tests that.
I had an estimate that the non-paid tests have well over $1 million now in cost to me in my lab.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I do this for, again, a reason. So like the reason, like the 15 you were talking about, it's someone at some time.
That's fucking commitment. Yeah. I just got to say it. That's fucking commitment.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it, and my wife hates probably the most on that one because I mean we don't make a lot of money as labs. We're kind of doing this by passion, to tell the truth. But looking at it, and like you say, the 15, why we even developed the 15 is from those lists. So if you expand that list, it might be 17, things like that. But that's what you have to look for. But then you go back to pymetrazine. Pymetrazine, if you're looking in very large amounts of SKUs of vape pens or concentrates, not even vape pens, just it's called concentrates, I think. I don't want to go too much details of it, but pymetrazine, where I get any data is how dangerous, and anyone can do this. The first thing is like go back to the DCC list and what can be used and can't be used in the regulations, as you said. It's stated in the regulations. The DPR, Department of Pesticide Regulation of California, put out a memo of which ones you can use. I wrote a little LinkedIn summary of it because I feel like no one looks at this stuff. And if you go, you can look up if anything has pretty much an action level in the state of California, you can't use it for an unintended use, or especially on cannabis. So anything that has a regulation in the state of California for a regulatory, like a limit of a pesticide use on any commercial product, you can't use on cannabis. That's 100% done. The second thing, you can use the approved list. It's very small. And then the third thing is you could use it if it says directly on the pesticide approved for cannabis use, or you check with the DPR. So when you do that, you look through the list and you start looking through them. Oh, all 66 you can't actually apply. You go to pymetrazine, 100% can't apply. So going back to this, like you figure out, okay, a lot of people have been asking me, how safe is it? How unsafe is it? This is the onus of not necessarily me, and I hate that question, but I mean, I'll do my best as a scientist. What I would do is I start comparing things. And what you can do is you can look at, like, let's just start with action levels set by the DCC. Someone who did that at some time and whatever cause and justification, I'll let them live the onus of that. But if I start comparing health effects like toxicities, known carcinogen, likely carcinogen, not known to be, there's different levels of carcinogenity of these compounds. Every one of these pesticides has a study done. They have a data set. You can look this up on the EPA's website. They'll have things like listed LD50s, that's if you consume it, LC50s, if you're being suffocated by it. They do it with the rats. They put them in a little cage and they cycle on how much pesticide per 4 hours and per meters cubed, and some point will kill the rats, and then that's your LC50. So those are those things. So I compare these data points.
By the way, I read the Google version of the rats. They didn't they didn't turn out well.
No. Yeah. But that's essentially what we're doing, is how long until we kill people with this stuff. So if you do a comparison study, so we work on it, like pymetrazine. The toxicity is level 2 toxicity. It's a likely known human carcinogen. That's getting to the next level above that is known human carcinogen. That is a problem. That's like stuff that's banned in the U.S. So there's still studies being done on it. There's not a lot of studies ever being done on what happens when you vaporize or smoke a pesticide, because that's not the intended use. Pesticides are produced for a specific use. So like pymetrazone, I believe, is produced for onion use. So in onions, they use them at this concentration. And why it's a lot of times you'll see a higher concentration in onions, because that's the intended use, and they did a study on it. When you go into other plants or other products, they don't have as high, because they caution on the side of, or they err on the side of caution with that kind of stuff. And like pymetrazine in the EU is 20 parts per billion on all agricultural products. That's the level you can do. So if you look at the last data set, I think it was over 300 samples, for pymetrazine, over 100 parts per billion, over 100 parts per billion, 24% fail. If you go above,
the ones we're seeing, like, not everyone had it, but the ones we're seeing are all in the parts per million.
So 24% of the products tested had it over 100 parts per billion.
Just to get that clear, you guys are shopping for distillate vapes, right? And if it's not, one source farmer, and look, let me give a shout out to Thomas. It's due him. He farms all his own shit. He knows exactly what his process is. He knows exactly how he farms it and brings it to the shelf. Is Raw Garden. And this is not a knock on the other brands. The other brands are reliant. And look, this is true for us as we launch M Juice and everything else. So you better get your biomass tested and get, I think you should get a Cat 4 test. I would like people to put that into place. But you're reliant on getting your biomass, and therefore you're basically relying on what the farmer is doing. So the parts per million is a motherfucker putting a lot of
So
shit
the
on
100 parts per billion, why I bring that up, that's a regulatory action level across a lot of pesticides. Category 1 need a required LOQ, so on. So let's just call it 100.
LOQ is level of quantification. Yeah.
Limited quantification.
Yeah.
So everything, like there's a lot of pesticides that are
learning
comparable.
shit.
There you go, with 100 parts per billion. So 24%, however, that over I think a half part per million or 500, we went down to about 20%. Over a part per million, you had 18.1% of the products being on the shelf, sold on the shelf with it. Why I have those like levels, I determine that. Like things like 100 parts per billion, that's like a level where you can have environmental contamination. When I say environmental contamination, that means, oh, it was previously used in this place. It's in my air handling system. It's being sprayed by the neighbors and it's drifting over to my crop. So that's like one of those things like that can be done. The 500 parts per billion level, that's getting to the area where you're starting to say this is application. Somebody probably sprayed it early on, or they're currently spraying it. The over parts per million, where the record set I think I've seen is 100 and something parts per million. This is getting to the
I saw 1.5. I think
1.5 or 100 or 100.5.
What was 1 point?
Oh, that's only 1.5 parts per million. I've seen consistently in brands 80s and 70s. And it's consistent. The interesting part about this, if you break it up by brand, it's patches. So like if you put all the data in a spreadsheet, you'll see pymetricine fails. Oh, it's this block, and then you scroll back over. Oh, it was one brand. Pass. Oh, pymetricine fails. Oh, one brand. So it has to do with the sourcing. And why I bring the part per million. Part per million, in my opinion, if you're looking at a concentrate, that's an application level. So someone was applying it. And it's not, I'm not saying the people that made the concentrate applied it.
Right.
But someone in some field made the decision that they're going to actively spray this on the cannabis plant. Which, if you go back to what we talked about, is not allowed by the DPR. That's not allowed by the DCC. The application of pesticides not approved by a regulatory body like the DPR is a criminal charge. And I'm not saying throw people in jail for weed, but criminal charges can be passed on for safety. And that's what that is. And it's not just safety of the product that people are consuming. It's the safety of the guy working on the field that doesn't know how to spray a pesticide and is inhaling it all day long. Like the thing, it transcends not just to that one person or
Right.
the final product. It transcends through the whole industry.
We're doing 340,000 tickets a month. And look, when we get this resolved, which I'm confident we will, this might be the most important thing that we do as a company. It probably is the entire time we're here. Because if you fast forward into the future that we don't want to see, what is it? 5, 10,000, 15, 20,000 people laying in cancer beds, all trying to figure out why they got, whatever cancer. And again, I think if this issue isn't resolved quickly, I mean, people have already been exposed for a long time. It's going to be an issue. And then this has been interesting to me, like in the kind of the pymetricine hunt, right? So you talk to the brands, a lot of the brands kind of see it as a widget. Then you go back to, there's all these big producers, there's mid-sized producers, and there's, really large producers. So there's like 4 really large producers, maybe 4 or 5 mid-sized producers that I've reached out to and talked to. And they also don't know, right? Because they're just getting it. It's kind of a widget for them too. And then they go back to the farmers. So what's happening is, let's just say biomass got down to $25 a pound. Well, like I think that guy should get 31 or 32 that doesn't have pymetricine. But since the brands are playing the 3 main producers off against each other, who has the cheapest liters, whatever, $700-800, let's get it down there. Then those guys have to go back to the farms and beat them up. And then again, not justifying it all, but a guy who's just trying to bump his yield a little bit fucking loses his morality. There's also just straight scumbags, and you shouldn't be applying it. And they're asking why. You go all the way to the cart. It's actually amazingly cheap. Mm-hmm. So the biggest mistake, my biggest regret, and I've said this in a few posts, is losing touch with the farms. So, here forward, I want to know all the farms. And then some of the samples that have come to my attention that had pymetricine in them, not ones that I necessarily tested, I could go back and trace a metric if it's my metric. And then they have 300 fucking farms in there. What are you going to do with that, right? And so it's just people adding farms, using all the farms. They don't want to redo it. So what's going to be important to us going forward is everything that we source at most is double source, hopefully single source. If a batch is a little too small, maybe it's double source. So we know our farm. And then, I've been hearing this from the producers, and I'd be curious as you test biomass, they're going back to some of their farmers that they've trusted for a long time. They're like kind of homies, right? And they're like, oh no, we're good. And then they're sending the tests off now. It's Cat 4, I think, is kind of taking hold, and they're failing. And motherfuckers are like, bro. I mean, I had one guy, I mean, he like sincerely is trying to fix it, and he's well-intentioned, and I believe that, he wants to be able to figure out how to produce Cat 4 disti so people know the difference. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck to do, right? So we're trying to figure this out. We're blackballing different farms. I have one farm that I know that's using it, that I was just happened to be one single source one. But are you testing more biomass now? And then what's your kind of experience of testing because everybody that I've had all these humble guys call me, which is great. I think a great side effect of this is going to be, which is super cool. Like, number one, let's get the fucking people safe. But the other really cool thing is it's going to make craft farming, great again, right? Which is, you have a smaller farm. You don't need to blast it with a bunch of shit, right? Or you have really good farming techniques. You're doing it right. And therefore, you should get a premium because you're not poisoning people. So I think that differential is months away. It's imminent, which will be, really cool. So, everybody's saying, oh, my shit passes. So it's like, go to the lab and see if it actually passes. So little by little, we're sending biomass over there. I mean, with the new biomass or more biomass maybe that you're getting, what are you seeing? And have you seen that emotional, like, fuck, bro, really?
Yeah, I mean, so like all the trends that Infinite Chemical Analysis Lab is around because of R&D testing. The people buy products to make a product. They've always come to me. A lot of people use me for that kind of testing because they want to know the truth. So if I'm going to buy business to business, I'm going to check with Josh or check with InfiniteCAL. Let's see if InfiniteCAL passes it. So I know I can run it through my instruments and I don't end up fucked in the long run when you have dirty distillate. So what we see in that is we've seen a lot of people looking at the trim and either finding low level contamination, some finding very high, and like, oh shit, I've been buying from this farm, like you said, for a long time. And I mean, I've talked to farmers over there, and this isn't just the pymetrocene game, where people started a farm and they might not be the grower. They don't really know, they funded stuff and now they're years down the road and they just kind of took a step away and they hired a new master grower or whoever. I'm not picking on anyone. But then they started using this bottle that says safe pesticide or safe mixture, remove all pests. And you flip it over and you just read, and there's 6 pesticides that are listed on the DC list or something. I've played this game with people a million times that swear up and down, and then I start testing products for them. Or, I dumped this on my plants. They say it keeps all the pesticides out, but it's organic. And then I test it, and it's 50% pesticide. And so, like, these people, sometimes they don't know. And they're not doing the onus on testing the products they're putting on their plants to make sure it's not on there. So it's both sides going. You have like people not knowing, you have people knowingly and willingly doing it, and that's the problem. And in my opinion, either way, they shouldn't make it to the shelf. The people that shouldn't pay for it is the customer that says see it. And like the farms are a good place to start at, but at the same time, the people making a vape pen, you're a manufacturer, you're buying it from a farm. Like any producer of any kind of product, if you're the final assembler of said products, and you sell it to the customer, you're the one that's liable for it because you should have checked it sometimes. Oh, I don't know, it's only the 66 pesticides we scan for. Well, maybe you should own us a little bit more. You should investigate. It goes back to the lab stuff, like people at the lab shopping game. Like in normal industries or different industries, non-cannabis, not normal, but like the traditional markets, most people vet their labs. Like to even become a lab, it's the opposite way that I've seen the cannabis.
No, I know. It's almost like
it's not like who gives me the highest numbers with the least pesticides. It's who does this right every time and make sure I'm not legally fucked in the long run.
Right.
And so there's a whole vetting process on that, and there's trials, and like people were like, I have other labs, and they'll request like all SOPs and everything we do, and they vet everything we do, and they'll ask us questions. They'll do tours. They'll systematic yearly come in and do a tour, make sure things are on the up and up, make sure things aren't looking bad in my lab because they don't want a bad passing, or they don't want me to pass something when it shouldn't. But I mean, that's not what's happening here.
Actually, I'm just, you got me just laughing because of, not in a good way, in a sick way, that the irony is you almost want worse SOPs or lower standards is what we've become as an industry. And then to your point, look, I think it's all our collective responsibility. I've seen posts trying to blast the DCC or whatever. And look, it's real easy for a brand to say the farmer does it. Once I'm, now enlightened on this, so much have eaten the testing apple, I feel like it's my responsibility. I'm selling the product, to do the best that we can as Catalyst and keep our customers safe. And there is some people that are, coming together and are gamed up on the issue and are making it a priority. But this, I just, people pointing at the DCC, I just think that's weak ass shit. or you
Not
know,
after you can't keep pointing at them and be like, oh yeah, I found out, but it's their fault. It's their fault. So this will bring back to the LA Times stuff too.
Right.
I have to go backwards to go forward on all any of this stuff.
No, it's cool, man.
So,
Free flow.
yeah. So the LA Times stuff, I really hope that people read the article. I don't know how many people I've talked to that, oh, it doesn't say this, it doesn't say that. Did you read it? Oh no, it was behind a paywall. I didn't read it. I just talked to a guy that talked to a guy. It's like, please read it. So like if you read that article, you know it's very interesting that not a lot of people talk about. Anyone in that article that was named was provided that data 6 months or so, 4 months, 6 months, I'm not going to quote a time frame on that. Prior to that, a list of samples that fail horribly for the 66 pesticides on being tested for the DC. Did anyone see any voluntary recalls? Did anyone see any of those producers that were named in there retesting their product and getting a confirmed COA, pulling it off the shelf and making sure that it was safe? I don't know any of them. I didn't see any voluntary recalls when they knew. Were they disregarding, 2 independent testing labs that were blindly given samples, both conspired to lie about the pesticides, and they talked to each other and then reported it back to the LA Times falsely to conspire on a blind product? No.
I don't know this for a fact, but I kind of know it for a fact just because I've lived long enough. The LA Times isn't dumb. They don't print stories without samples. No. Somewhere in a vault, they got those samples.
Oh,
right? Yeah, right?
Yeah. So,
because defamation, when you write a story like that, defamation is real.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to pass judgment on how things happened or whatnot. But at the end of the day, if it was me and somebody accused me of anything, the very first thing I would do, especially if it was like that, I'd fire motherfucking defamation. Not for the money, just to clear my good name, right? And so that, again, being real careful here, because if the idea is to clean it up, I don't want to go too far back. But like, you didn't see nobody fire off a defamation suit.
And you didn't also see anyone pulling things off the shelf. And why I bring this up, it kind of brings up what we were just talking about, like the pipe entries. It's new, not 66. As brands are starting to see this come out, are we seeing things get pulled off shelf? I'm not. I mean, people know about this in the industry, so is the tactic to sell it off and let it go through? Why bring that up? There are companies in this industry, and there are good players and actors in this industry. I'm not saying there's bad and good, but there are great actors that would pull it off the shelf if they're finding it.
Right.
There are. I mean,
arguably. I think
you talk about Thomas. He would pull it off the shelf tomorrow.
He
wouldn't give a shit.
I do think like, so there's been a few and like that have, hearsay come across, and then it's like, let's just say it's, and I'm not gonna say this specifically happened, but it's a really good brand that's well-intentioned, and it's in 20% of the supply, right? So maybe the onus is on the brand, but I think the concern is, look, and brands that were in that story, and maybe rightfully so, they paid their price. So I would at least like to see them change their practices, which puts you 30, 45 days away from having a clean shelf. And now we're setting out to at least market, so there's informed consent and trying to set people up with biomass. I get maybe why they don't want to do, really, really dangerous shit. I think that's a little different. But like, as soon as you should at least nip it in the bud, I think, as a minimum, right?
Yeah.
And move forward. And then, from where we sit, since we kind of know like, hey, it was, maybe not our shelf, but like, I know it was in that brand and that brand and that brand and that brand. It's like, okay, let's just figure out, I've probably done all the testing, at least in the short term. I think we're going to go back to testing that we're going to do and try to resolve it on a mass scale. But I will say, like, especially the Clenophenfor, how the fuck you say that one? Yeah. That one was in a lot of shit.
It still is.
Right. You think, I know, I saw one, not from our shelf. It was a pretty small brand of a lot of tests. How many would you say today you think are DCC dirty?
You're probably today being produced after that time story and everything.
Like today, if you just went over to my shelf,
sub 5%.
Yeah. I think it's maybe
sub
even,
5. So this like you named a pesticide, chlorphenapir. That's a more difficult analyte to analyze. So like if a lab's not doing its job and not seeing it, the brand never finds out. If the brand never finds out and things are all, I've worked with someone that, I'm not gonna name a name. Lab shut down. They came back to me and they ran a bunch of their samples they've been running, and they're like, holy shit, they all fail. I swear to God, I wasn't paying the lab. I wasn't paying anything. What do I do? And I'm like, well, you're fucked. I don't know what to tell you. All your samples coming out of your grow are failing. And he's like, well, I've been using this. And I'm like, read the STS. It says it has chlorphenapir in it. And so like, he's like, I was going to a lab, honestly, that offered a really cheap price, and all my shit's failing now. And it was not their fault. And I'm like, Yeah.
No, I
So,
do think there's a
you get
big
what I'm saying?
difference between intent, overspray, accidentally doing it. You know, it's in the walls of the building, you know, minimal parts per billion, parts
Yeah.
per million, and having the intent. But at the end of the day, what I would like to see the labs, you know, be partners with the stuff they're testing. And I get that everybody's hanging on by the edge. So when there's a failed batch, like, you know, that's a tough decision. And like, you know, am I going to go out of business? I'm going to make payroll. And, you know, until you walk in those shoes, again, I'm not justifying it. But the minimum you can do is, you know, try and fix it. And I think most labs the good labs are willing to go walk the grow, try to troubleshoot what it is, look at what the guy's applying to the plants, maybe see what's in the walls. And the industry needs to move that way versus what's happening in the reverse is let me go down the path of least resistance instead of like, you know, let's, you know, fix the root problem. And then I'll just kind of like one thing just to kind of for the viewers maybe to understand that is going down. Not every brand that has it is culpable, and a lot of the ones that I talk to, you know, actively, you know, want to fix it. So if you're a distillate brand and you're just trying to get a lot of distillate because you're making the pins and you just got to get it over to your producer, what you're going to do is you're going to either contract the biomass directly or your producer is. And what that producer was doing, you know, whatever's left, 31 labs, 29 of those 31 labs are only testing for the DCC 66. So you put it out for testing, great. We got a great biomass source. It's all good. It beat the DCC test, right? And then, boom, you turn that into oil. You can't even have, I just learned this yesterday because you're doing our MJU stuff. You can't even have a COA that has all 400 for 380, whatever, infinite chemicals. They won't even, weird enough, I would love to produce a COA that showed we passed all 360 or whatever. We you know, we did the non-detect on the biomass, but you can't. It can only be the DC666. So now you have the COA, you have everything. You're the brand, you think everything is good. I've talked to a brand that's like, holy fucking shit. And the issue was the labs aren't gamed up enough to test for the category 4. So I think that's the evolution, you know, that needs to happen because there's really no other way to check the farm. And then I don't even think all the farms know it, right? You know, whether it's an old building, to your point, contaminants in the soil, certain areas, super fucking hard, you know, to grow in. The irony is probably like fucking Humboldt sounds like a pretty good pesticide-free environment that's grass farms. Meanwhile, the Central Valley and the fucking Santa Barbara has all the fucking canopy, but what they grew there before is pretty fucked up, right?
Or they grow there currently. Go to pesticideinfo.org. They show active spraying panels of commercial pesticides that are allowed for by the DPR. So everyone that sprays pesticides in the state of California should be registering how much they sprayed on what date to the DPR. And then they aggregate that data, and you can make maps of what pesticides are spraying, and they'll show the map of California, and they'll show like a line through that area of red. And that's where they're spraying that specific pesticide. You can look up biometrics.
Yeah, then even if you have a green, you're not full outdoor, even if you have a greenhouse, it's going to seep through.
It can, but then that's why when you go back and like you look at the concentrator of the flower, and you're like, is it application? Is it drift? Is it like these things? And that's why those levels, like this is rough levels I'm talking about, the part per million and higher. But when you're seeing the part per million and higher, and all of or 20% of it, that's saying to you that it's applied.
Oh, yeah. While we're going all the way back, let me actually ask you about this. Not nursery.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, but like, you know, I've had a few people say, "Oh, I gotta check the nursery." What's your thought on the?
So think about the nursery theory. Let's say in the nursery they sprayed the crap out of the plant. You have this little baby plant, weighs 1 gram. Okay, your contamination level was 1% of mass of that 1 gram was the pesticide itself. How big does a plant grow into by the long term that you're going to go into a plant? It goes from 1 gram into pounds. You understand what I'm saying? Pounds and pounds of plant. You're such a minute source of it, you dilute the pesticide out unless it's being reapplied. So it's not coming from a nursery. Like I remember this is a long time ago, probably 2016, 2017. I'm not going to name people.
So that's like some dog ate my homework bullshit.
Yeah, it's dog ate my homework. But I remember there was this rumor that, myclobutanol is being produced by the plant. So if it was sprayed once, it started producing it, so it'll keep producing it more and more as it grows. I'm like, no, it does not. Plant biology does not work that way. You can't produce pesticides by itself. It's the same type of thing. You spray it when it's a little baby plant, and it gets passed out of the nursery, a couple grams. There's no way it's going to make it all the way through. And it's not going to be contaminated. You're not going to see the part per million level. You might see the part per billion level at the very end.
So there could be trace amounts, but in so much as there's part per million, no nursery excuses. It's fucking bullshit. Let me just ask you kind of if I would say total closeouts. By the way, that was a fucking fast hour 15, man. I can sit here all day, but you know we know your attention span is limited. You know, what do you have to say to the critics, look, I have have my fair share of critics out there. So I always say, if you don't have some haters, you're doing something wrong. What do you have to say to the critics as far as whatever, pretty much what the criticisms are? Again, I don't think you really give a fuck, just having known you. But just curious if you have anything to say to them, on camera, that what would be your response to them?
I mean, the critics elevate it. If you know you have a problem, fix it. Don't just find a new lab. Don't find a way to pass it. If it's a lab that's a critic, I mean, people know how to do things right. Hire someone to help you do it right, or don't be in the industry. I mean, to tell the truth, the reason I have a passion for this industry, I'm an analytical chemist. I don't know how the hell anyone's in this industry without having a passion like that. Like, to be in a lab like this, you have to have these passions. So I hope the critics keep criticizing. I don't do anything wrong. I have provable data. I'm always there to push the industry or push the safety of this stuff. Work with people like that. Don't shun us and say we're doing bullshit or being liars or setting people up or whatever people want to say, or I'm being too harsh about the reality of the system. I mean, let's get it out there. Let's let the people decide on what they want to smoke. I mean, it's the same thing, like the stickers you're talking about putting on all the products that are raising the bar above. Why don't we just raise the bar collectively as a group and see what happens then? Maybe this industry, no one really gives a shit about our bar raise, but maybe people do.
No,
maybe
I think they do a lot.
They do.
And then, we had our little tasting, and granted, they're listening to what I'm saying, so it's not an exact sampling.
Yeah.
And I had a guy come by today who's a reviewer, and these are all heavy smokers. They're super interested in this Cat 4. And when you tell them, it's like, hey, bro, it's like 25 cents more to fix that problem.
Yeah.
Like, this is not some, like, it's going to make the product go from, 25 to 50.
No.
It's going to make it go from 25 to 25. Like, I don't think anybody is going to think twice about throwing another 25 cents on it, right?
That's what I've always said. It's like the difference between these two makes me sick. Like, we cut a corner, we save 10 cents, 20 cents, but what are we really doing to cut that corner? Does someone really need that 10 cents to survive? I don't think so.
No, it's just
prices.
I just think the motivations got put in the wrong place. And when you take the rest of it and everything else, and look, I've even said I'm willing to pay, because more or less we sell 200,000 vapes. And, you reverse engineer the ones that, you kind of know where they're sourcing, or they're sourcing, indoor. So, like, it wouldn't quite work. It gets us to, like, whatever it is, 130, 140,000 vapes. I'd pay $30,000 a month to know that. And that's what I'm saying. I'll pay the difference. I'll pay more for the liters, right? So I'm starting to meet labs that have the liters. I'll pay more for the biomass. I'll subsidize it. Because at the end of the day, like, our weed maps bill is, we love weed maps. We're just saying, it's fucking $100,000, $90,000 fucking bill, right? And this is $30,000 or whatever else we're spending money on as we move forward. But to have a safe shelf, I think it's important. I think the good thing that's going to happen out of this, and again, the motivation from the start is public safety, but I do think the public is going to appreciate it. So I think there's going to be, a good backdoor marketing incentive. And then as some brands do it, I think the critics are going to get left by the side of the road. This is the next evolution. I think anybody who doesn't see that is, and why I like the name Category 4, because we had the shitty Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3. Category 4 is just like the natural, evolution of where we're going. And I think any critic that doesn't see that or isn't all over this is going to get left behind. And we'll see. We're going to start marking products, and we'll see if that, ultimately the consumer cares. I'm very strong opinion that they do. It sounds like you want to play that song. What is it? The Truth Hurts for your critics. Yeah. Yeah. And that, like, my thing on it, and from everything I've seen and heard, and, again, I did that full panel test, quite a bit of them, with Josh and Zach from Enresco, and even the THC with other labs and stuff. I'm telling you, the results are fucking like, one guy's got 1.52, the other guy's got 1.55, and these are really high levels, right? So, I've become, a believer in the efficacy of the test, and, a big fan of what, Josh is doing. My personal opinion, he's going to be a hero to the industry. And if we get this right, this is our moment to get this right. We're like, this is no hyperbole. We're going to save lives, and we're going to empty, cancer beds. And in so much as people get cancer, hopefully, they don't, but it's going to be from the food and, everything else they're poisoning with us. What do you think?
So the last thing, like, the best thing that happens in this, nothing happens. So, like, you get what I'm saying? We're never going to see the result. And that's the
what
best
I'm saying.
case scenario.
No, it's the future you won't.
Yeah.
The cool
we'll
part
never
is,
know we won, but we won.
Yeah. No, the future that wasn't lived. You don't get to see the alternative universe. The universe that we're heading for, I'm pretty confident, involves and look, it might not, the cancer is just one thing, right? All sorts of respiratory issues, everything else, right? And, you go back to the previous vape gate, which was like, is that hype? What's going on? Is that really cannabis? No, it was tested. That was kind of my opinion of it. And, now it's like, there might be something to that. Who knows? Maybe it was COVID early on, whatever. And it was flaring up more if you were a vapor. So there could be all these things. And again, we won't know.
No.
Like we'll put our head a pillow at night and be like, hey, I had a few cents in resolving that. What do you think?
The last thing for the critics. Sorry,
Yeah.
last thing.
No, go fucking get the critics. Fuck them all.
No, the critics at least know me. At least talk to me.
I agree
Criticize
with
me
that.
if you want.
Right.
Have the conversation. I have an open door policy. If you want to talk to me, I don't care how much you hate me, how much shit you've talked about me, how much you haven't. Give me a call. Find a reason to talk shit about me. Understand who I am and where I'm coming from before you put all this bullshit out there. Because a lot of the stuff I see out there is untrue. And I don't care. I always do an open. I mean, I don't know how many times I've offered people to talk, like even on like LinkedIn or something, and I don't have time to talk to you. But I want to criticize you everywhere. It's like, fuck, just pick up the phone. You don't have time to talk to me, but just pick up the phone.
I'll debate anybody anytime, anywhere. And when you have that opinion about, or when you're willing to do that and get into the arena, that means you're on the side of truth, right? People that are ducking and dodging and obfuscating, my opinion is, why. There might be some other reason. Maybe they're fucking camera shy, but, I think anybody who's willing to be out front and be like anytime, anywhere, like let's sit down and talk, basically no preconditions at all. What do you think the future is? Where do you see it, kind of heading? And then I'll just kind of throw in the other question too. So just talk about the future generally. And then, what I see happening is just part of I see a lot of positive things happening and I think it's going to get fixed. And I really believe in this category 4 we're working on, but how that plays out. And I also see guys finding the next thing. I think, and we talked about this, I think this is going to be the year of the pymetrozine, but it might take a year and a half to get it all out of the system, right? Because when they first started doing the testing before, it took a year and a half or whatever. But, what do you think the future holds? And, how do we continue to stay vigilant? So like first things first, we got to solve for it, but this is an infinite game, right? It's poisoners and poison cock blockers, basically is kind of the game, once we resolve for the issue. So, what's your kind of take on the future? And then, how we stay vigilant to prevent, whatever Bangladeshian, nothing against Bangladesh, Indian, Chinese pesticide that they don't test for that comes into the, system.
So, I mean, I think there's a brighter future finally. I mean, I've been looking at this thing and it got pretty dim for a while that no one cared anymore. And it's nice to see people actually are caring again. And we are looking to make a safer product. I see this kind of transforming. I see even the regulatory body, the DCC, you're going to see a step up in enforcement. You're going to see things coming down. They're going to make sure the product is safe. If they want to run $5 million campaigns, they better not be lying because there's always people in the background looking to see if they are. I'm not saying it's me, but I'm not saying it's not. So let's make sure we get a better future for that. Then the other part, like the pesticide, what's next? I mean, I've been saying that for years. The 66, I mean, a long time ago, that was really bad. It kind of got cleaner over the time, and I was like, okay, we're only looking at 66. You take your blinders off, look out, you'll see, 350, we got these pesticides. And the other thing, one comment I would say, we're looking at this sparkly, dangling pymetrozine at this high levels. There's other pesticides that are being found that are not these sparkling things at 5 parts per million, but maybe 3 or 300 parts per billion. But they're known carcinogens that are banned in the United States that shouldn't be on the plants at all. So like we're seeing stuff that could be more dangerous than this high level ones even. So like that's the thing you want to always think about. We look for these sparkly things and let's key to that. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but we got to make sure we have safe products. So what I see going on, Maybe this is the groundwork. This is the job of a regulatory body, what we're talking about here with this whole thing. They should be screening it and like, oh, guess what? New regulations coming out. We're adding 15 more pesticides to the 66. Now we have 81, right? And then next year we keep doing the screening. We're checking it. And by the way, I mean, we're working on a 625 list, so don't worry. I'll keep going in this. And it's just because that's what we were working on originally. We cut out to the 380. But
only 380. We're on our way to 625.
I mean, we'll keep. I'm just doing it because I think that's what's needed, because then you can pick them out.
Right, because that's what ended up happening. Yeah. So like, and again, there's a debate over exactly what Cat 4 is. For now, it's like Interesco, Infinite, figure it out. There might be a there might be a slimmed down version, but what you're and why I think it will always be critical to make the test as broad as possible, because and I've seen enough tests now where the vast majority of those are non-detect.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have all those, you wouldn't know which ones were non-detect and which ones you found, right? Yep. So that's why the broad screening is so important. And just because like whatever, chemical Z has not been found yet doesn't mean it can't make an appearance one day. And now that I do believe that pymetrozine is on the radar, not for necessarily moral and ethical reasons, people are going to stop using it. But, as sure as the day is long, people are going to find more shit. So even at 650, can they find the 650 first?
I mean, you always can. And so like that's the thing about most of the industries, the commercial use of pesticides. They trust the people to use it appropriately. And they don't always, if you go look at agricultural product, that specific product isn't screened for 500 pesticides. They're screening for what their allowable limits are for that specific thing, because they don't always look. And then they have internal labs that do these broad screening methods on things to make sure it's not getting done. But knowing that person isn't me, or the onus is on a guy that owns a lab that cares too much.
So it's amazing. Yeah. Like literally, if you didn't do what you did, I could just speak for myself, and I think a lot of other people, some people, were complicit. And look, some people were beating the whole DCC thing. But even then, that would have never even got resolved for. I wouldn't have been enlightened and kind of set out on this, mission to get rid of it. I didn't even know that there was, I just assumed they tested for everything that was dangerous. I don't know why the fuck I thought that. I should know better. But I just assumed that was what was happening. So this is like 6 weeks. And even after I kind of heard the news that, there was, accusations that some brands were cheating the DCC panel, my very first test that I did had people not been DMing and fucking commenting. And I was like, bitch, this ain't no fucking show. I'll go, okay, let's test for all of it. Let's triple blind it, right? I want to get to the bottom of it. But even that, that first test really laid kind of foundation for the rest of the knowledge. So, again, I think wrap it up. You got anything else to say? And then I kind of want to finish it off, but just any. I mean, we could honestly, we should do a part 2, man. We're an hour 30.
There's 20 topics I haven't even talked about yet.
There's some things I even want to throw at you right now, but I'm like, we're in an hour 30. We're not quite to Joe Rogan status where we could go 3 hours yet. We got him for an hour and a half. I think that's pretty good. But anything you want to say?
I mean,
I'll close it up.
Everyone out there, we should all be focusing on let's improve it. Let's not wait for the DCC to tell us what to do, to say that regulate these pesticides. Self-regulate, actually create safe product. Stand on the shoulders of each other and raise each other up. If people don't want to join it, then let them stay down at the bottom and let them go away.
100%. And look, the information's there if you're active and you hit it. And, it took me like a week just to be able to say pymetrozine. Obviously, there's a lot of other dangerous stuff in there. I'm getting some of this stuff down. But look, I just want to say this. I think this will be the most important issue of our time in cannabis. So it needs to get resolved. I see Josh and what Infinite's work is crusading and heroic, not hyperbole. I think he's, again, he'll never know, but I think he will be credited indirectly. Maybe God will know for saving thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. That's what's at stake here. And I'm a supporter. We're going to continue on this journey. We're going to try to make sure everything is category 4 on our shelf. As fast as we can. We're going to start stickering stuff. By the time this airs, we'll already have kind of our example batch, and then we're going to start handing them out. Just saw Thomas yesterday. He'll be right up there with the first that have blue check marks. I think that the consumers want it, which is a good thing. I think the incentives are there for everybody to do it. And look, I just want to thank Josh for coming on, and in so much as people don't know who he is. I would say he's at least as important, if not the most important figure, in cannabis that's brought this issue forward, which is probably also the most, important issue that there is. So I thought it was important to bring him on the platform. We wanted to launch season 2. Couldn't think of, a better guest. We trying to make vapes great again. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed episode 1. Gonna sign off. How we sign off? Weed for the people. That shit was fire, dog.